Well, hello, how you doing? I'm Arlen Roth, and welcome to my Rockabilly video. Had a bunch of others on Hot Licks that have alluded to some country things and some blues things, and I think that with Rockabilly guitar, we're talking about kind of a combination of the two of them, and of course, historically, something that was more sort of on its own in terms of a technique. There are a lot of styles, a lot of techniques that I employ within this particular style of music that I'm going to cover in today's video. And a lot of that was sort of employed in that opening piece I was playing for you. So what I'd like to do first is give you some notes so you're in tune with me. And we're going to start with the high E. So we're in tune. Let me turn off my foot switch here. Here's high E. Now B. G. D, A, and low E. Okay, before we get into some really complicated stuff, I'd like to start off with some right hand and simple left hand technique, just to get into some original feel, original flavor here. We're talking about heel damping with the right hand, which is very important. You want to get that kind of sound with the clicking. Okay, now what's occurring there is this actual meaty side of my hand here is actually touching over the strings, not too far ahead. You don't want to get this kind of sound where you can actually make them sharp. You want to just be right over the top of that particular bridge. And what's occurring there is I'm letting the high strings ring free, but the lower ones are being damped. It's sort of a la Travis picking, like this. So that's how that sound is achieved. You're actually getting a separate alternation and a sort of dampened bass in conjunction with sort of a clean, you know, high lead note there. So if you turn on a little bit of reverb, a little bit of actually delay, digital delay, you get that kind of slap effect, you can get this sort of sound, which is a little bit more authentic. For that lick, I'm actually playing here. There's a little slide and pull off. From the 5th fret, 4th fret, 2nd. Now for A. Back to E. Now B is a more closed position. A, B. Now when we're talking about heel damping, now I want to go on a little bit to the Travis picking style. And this is really important. I mean, if you listen to some of the great players like Cliff Gallup and Scotty Moore and Eddie Cochran and Carl Perkins and the endless amount of people who really made rockabilly happen, they were sort of playing, it was country guitar playing with a blues gospel sort of influence. And a lot of it came from the Merle Travis and later Chet Atkins kind of style of picking. So in this case, it's important to first establish your pattern. You're getting root, root, fifth root. Now a typical pattern with this is an E chord here. Now you can slide it up to A, and very typical in rockabilly is a little... Some notes are actually picked together. And obviously some are off the beat. Now when you go up to A, you also have the option to do a little bend as well. You can slide up. Some guys actually slide up with their thumb and actually keep it there in this sort of very cramped position. I'm not a big fan of that, but it does happen in real life. There's a little room in there for a bend. You're taking your pinky and going from the 6th to the 7th of the chord. Then open. Okay, now there are some variations on that kind of thing that we can fool around with. Very simple things, but they make a nice statement, like in your open position. Actually alternating between your E and an A7. It just takes getting used to that. It takes some practice, and until you develop the independence is really important, because if I want to throw in some lead licks over something like that where I can free myself up, I'll go into a more constant bass pattern. So if I'm alternating like this, if I start with a constant bass, so you develop that constant bass. Sometimes it's good to practice it even in a non-country or rockabilly approach. You might want to just try a blues thing and find something on top that equals the pattern. It'll sound like there's independence. So you're getting 3 on top every 2 on the bottom. Any repetitious pattern like that sense, I'm actually going in a circular motion where I just keep going around. But you could also, if that's a little too tough for you, you might want to actually play the downbeats with your shuffle bass. Okay, now, talking about the bass again, if you want to get into something a little bit funkier, it's something that I played in the beginning where you actually have a downbeat type of quarter note pattern or eighth note pattern that's straight. It's not a shuffle or dotted eighth feel. And you're playing an octave to it and using pull-offs and hammer-ons as well. What's occurring there is you're actually sort of pinching it together, and I like to use the pick and middle finger to really get a tight grip on those sort of licks. Notice one is actually damped more than the other. One is clear, so I'm just damping the low E string there with the heel of my hand. You've got a lot of options. You can bend or hit hammer-ons. So getting more into sort of now a more traditional sound, sort of a straight-ahead open rockabilly sound. We get sort of Mystery Train sort of approach here. So what's occurring there is we're actually alternating now, just straight to the A chord, with a little bar. But we're not stopping our constant bass. Here I am moving it silently. Meaning that and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Little hammer on there. Now for A, I'm getting more of a constant bass or alternating between the bass and the fifth, the root and the fifth. And that's optional also with this open position here. Listen to how that rolls. That same position can be slid up one fret, and you've got E7. Now for B7, just up one fret more. alternate on the 7th fret between your root, 5th. Okay, a lot of people always ask me about the pick and finger technique, and I've been talking about it for years and preaching it for years. I really like it because of the combination of sort of rhythm playing that you can get and the ability to break into lead riffs and lead licks with it. In fact, there are some rhythm parts that can be used with what I call the roll position, sort of like a banjo roll type of approach. Some of the things I've done, like in G that uses, are very straight ahead. So that comes from the pick and two fingers, sometimes alternating, and sometimes simply rolling. There's a little dissonant lick there. So now, going back to the E and A type positions, you have these wonderful roll things like this. For A, it looks like this. When I get my 7th there with the open G string, utilizing the open string as much as possible to get kind of a sustain over your actual lick, and that's going to give you sort of almost an illusionary effect. Say you've got a pedal steel bend where you're actually pulling away from you right here. Using two fingers to bend that. So you see, sometimes it actually becomes pick and two fingers at the same time. Now for E. Sometimes I'll create something chromatic out of that. Where you're just walking up on the D string. Now all this open stuff gives you the opportunity to start shifting around. So you get into a pattern like this and you can start improvising with it. there again, I'm using the open string. Say if I play this sort of run. Now I can shift up to this position. I'm in sort of position number 2. Throw in some harmonics. Low bend down here is actually going from the G to the A on the low E string, while you're barring with your first finger on the 2nd fret. So there's your A chord. And the position for G was simply this. You have to be very careful to just bend that and not dampen out the D string. Sometimes going down to E, I'll give a little twangy bend there on the 2nd. Okay, one other technique that I love to use with this pick and finger idea is where I grab and actually arpeggiate chords with it 4 licks. Like, for example, this sort of thing in A. Okay, what I'm doing there is I'm actually playing this A form. It's not the whole bar, but it's just a partial bar. It's the 5 notes of A, and sliding up 2 at a time. And look what happens to my left hand. I'm only playing 2 notes at a time. It slowly sheds itself. I'm not just keeping all that pressure to hold that chord. And it's too much to damp then. As it comes up, 2 notes, 2 notes, 2 notes, 2 notes, and then I slide up. I'm using my 3rd finger. Most of you will probably want to use your pinky, but I'm weird, so I use my 3rd finger there. A little Chuck Berry in there. Now I come across and then walk down chromatically. That little shuffle pattern down there is being played actually with pick and 2 fingers. Now again. For the D, I was cheating a little bit and playing sort of a D 9th chord. Coming across. So that's how it works. That time I'm not playing on adjacent strings. I'm actually leaving a string off in between and playing the G string and E string, D and B, etc. You can do fancier things with that too. You can actually arpeggiate with a double slide. So you're just sliding. Very straight ahead. Sort of like a Hawaiian guitar, sort of like a lap steel approach. And in terms of the dissonant sort of licks and the banjo style, I like to get into the pick and finger and just have block positions that I'll hold, like. Okay, slowly, that's. Notice how I'm always juxtaposing that open A string against those lead notes. E, there's a nice one up here. You hit a harmonic or straight. When I come down to E now, I'm using again this little hammer-on for that sort of banjo effect. Have it here as well. That again uses the pick and finger roll, a three-note thing. While we're on the subject of two notes at a time, I do like to break up chords as I had shown earlier, but there are, of course, these licks that maybe you know a lot of them already, but they are very important to rockabilly style. It's sort of a Chuck Berry type approach where you're actually playing those sort of runs, so sliding. I'm bending there a single step, half step, sorry, single fret. And one of the ones that I like to use, utilizing an open string for a real sort of trick, is this E to A. Okay, so what's happening there is it's just very simple, really. It sounds weird, but it's simple. You're just bending up a half step from your minor third to your major third with the open E string on top, and then pulling off. Now let it down, and you've got your minor third, or now flatted minor seventh of your 4 chord. You can hammer on here, pull off. Then for the 5 chord, I'm just going up one more. Now notice, sometimes I'll help the bend up with one extra finger, but then I'll have to abandon that bend and keep the pitch constant. That's something to really practice. You have to keep that in mind. Sometimes you may bend with extra fingers and then need one to play something after that. Here's a real perfect example of that. Here I use 2 fingers to bend up on the G string. And my index finger has come right across there to catch that note. But this has not lost pitch. So that's very important. That's something that a lot of people neglect when they bend strings. And of course, most people, when they bend strings, they start bending with one finger and wango, they're right off the fretboard. It's really important to help it along with as many fingers as possible. Another thing that I learned from watching myself play over the years and teaching is that not only do I bend with the fingers behind the actual note, but I'm also helping push the other strings out of the way. A lot of guitarists make the mistake of going under, and so when they return, they actually catch those strings and you get a lot of clangs. So you want to be able to return well. And you know, that's also the thumb comes over and damps out some notes as well. is what I call my train lick, where you're actually, it looks like a D7th position. You're in E here. And it's a little trickier than some other licks because the two notes have to go up one fret at a time. They're both going up a half step, and that's harder than actually bending them different distances, because one is obviously easier to bend than the other, so you have to compensate. This one sounds great with the tone control. The volume part is the most commonly used. Getting that sort of effect, but the tone control is neat because it's like the old sort of Speedy West style of that school of playing on the lap steel and the pedal steel. Sort of a wah-wah effect. So when you're up there now, you can also do this kind of position, which is also a nice trick little lick, where you've got two notes here, and then these two. Two notes sliding up, and then these two right after it. It's important to take these sort of things and experiment with them, and try to come up with some ideas on your own, because it's really these are things I came up with, and somebody else will think of something else, and hopefully you'll come up with your own approach to use these. But I just like to fool around with them a lot, and string bending is something that, another thing you should keep in mind is the idea of substitution, that many times you're substituting for something that might be rather ordinary or something that you're used to hearing many times. I mean, I started by, playing things, hearing these little hammer-ons that the Zalyanovsky of the Love and Spoonful would play. And I would just substitute. So even if you have very repetitious patterns, like just, straight, corny licks, well, just make them into bends. Bending up silently first, release, then down. Something I do a lot is just sort of establishing the lick, establishing the position, and then playing it silently, bending up to it silently after that. Coming down. Okay, now we're talking about a little bit more of a closed position for the Travis-type style, and a little bit slower, more moody approach to rockabilly. your A positions. When I get to D, a little bend in there. I walk this up and actually bend with my index finger. Now for the E augmented, I do a little lick like this. Just that position shifted. It's always the same. It's the same chord, 2 frets above or 2 frets below. Sort of the way an augmented, or sorry, diminished works. Every 3 frets. Well, this works every 2 frets. It's sort of a Cliff Gallopy kind of eerie sounding thing. So that's something you can fiddle around with, and it's something that, you know, I would recommend you pick up some of those old records, and maybe they're out on new CDs now, but you can try and pick up on some of that stuff and listen to it. I really recommend Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps for the kind of work that Cliff Gallup did. He was probably the most outlandish of the rockabilly players of that era. Okay, that's the same sort of technique like I was showing you for E earlier, but for the closed A position. And we're doing a little 7th hammer on here. While we have a constant bass. You could also bring in the G and B strings as well. Walk it up. So you have a little bit of freedom once you establish that bass. Now for the D7. Now your E, you're actually going to walk down again. You're shifting from your A position of E to your C7 position of E. And I like to use these little ending licks that use my pick and middle finger. I'm actually shifting again to the open position. Again, you probably noticed I have that quick slap echo on. Just repeating one time, and it's almost to the level of the original signal that you're playing. So you get that old sort of delay Sun Records kind of sound there. Okay, I'd like to share with you another sort of flash technique that's very useful in rockabilly and other kinds of playing as well, which is where you set the delay with a fairly long delay, and it's only one repeat, like this. And you can set it for any speed you want, but it should be a fairly good distance. And what happens is, if you get the feedback and the level of it to be equal to your originally picked note, you can play sort of in between them and get a time happening where the notes are following each other, doubling over the actual and playing like a harmony or an answer to the next lick. Here's an example of what I mean. I picked this up from Danny Gatton, and there's also another explanation of it and more of it on his video as well. So here's what I mean. Here's your pattern. What I tried to do there, and I think I did, is just cut off the delay at the end so you don't have a, like that, you don't give it away at the end. So I'm basically following some pretty basic patterns, and what's neat is you can get with the slap an actual answer for the chord you play, and while that answer is happening, you're already playing lead notes over that. Without the delay, I'm playing something very simple like this. I try to arpeggiate because you actually get harmonies here. One of the little tricks is if you get into bends and just suddenly bend up. You get sort of a feeling of almost like there's a million notes following each other. And I like to also, in the style of playing without any delay, get into these sort of things that sound like that too. I know a lot of people just think, oh yeah, I know that. It's not that simple. You're actually playing with the pick and middle finger. There I'm bending up to my A, coming down to a seventh. So I'm bending up to the major third and matching it. Another one I like to use is just straight dissonance. Notice it is a flash thing, but I'm using it musically to make some kind of statement. I'm going somewhere with it. So it becomes part of a blues lick. It starts out with sort of a country sound and ends up 3 frets up in a blues sort of sound. So it's very rockabilly. Country and blues together, you got rockabilly, right? Yeah, I'm actually bending behind the nut. You have these sort of bends. Bending right behind it. Yeah, you see, it's the same position. Major third on top, coming down to your seventh. Just bending up to your root behind the nut. And that has to be a straight string type of pull, like a Fender type guitar that has that sort of effect. All right, so I hope we've covered enough for you today, and I hope we've got some good material for you. You know, just send those cards and letters in, and we hope that you keep enjoying our videos, and I hope you enjoyed this one particularly because I had a great time doing it. And we have a lot of material in the country vein and in the rockabilly sort of vein to check out from the catalog, so you can check out some other videos as well if you're into this style, because we're really into it. And it's been a pleasure being here today, and I hope you've enjoyed the video. So I'll play a little stuff out now, and keep up the practicing and keep up some of the new ideas, okay? Take care now.